This week on Capitol Report, nearing the finish line on the 2024 legislative session.
This is it. This is what it's all about.
A look at the debate around the major bill on climate change.
Closest I'm going to get to a green bill today was this outfit.
It's not easy being green.
Also, the excitement over the latest state revenue projections.
This might be the most shocking consensus revenue numbers we've seen in years.
I feel shocked.
Plus, what's happened with the juvenile justice reform here in Connecticut?
The state of Connecticut is moving toward a Lord of the Flies approach.
Whoever holds the conch gets to speak. That's the rule.
And at the request of Joe Ganim, Connecticut's biggest city gets its own song.
Come on back to Bridgeport.
I give.
Sorry.
Capitol Report starts now. Welcome to Capitol Report. I am Tom Dutch. We are so good you're spending part of this Sunday morning alongside the power panel, the great mayor of the town of Bloomfield, Danielle Wise.
Good morning.
The coach, Joe Simowitz, former Speaker of the House.
Good morning, sir.
This Republican strategist. And look who's over there filling in for Johnny Mack, the current minority. We don't call you minority, we call you GOP leaders, right?
Yeah,
right?
I'll take that. I'll take that.
There.
Big shoes to fill.
Stephen Harding. And for my Democratic pals, you gotta love a Republican who's named his golden retriever Kennedy.
My son's Carter, too.
Okay, Carter?
I'm really bipartisan.
All right, guys. Hey, the 2024 legislative session will come to an end on Wednesday at midnight. As we approach the finish line, let's just say the level of excitement has been somewhat muted. Numerous bills died on the vine while others remain in limbo. One of which we discussed last week has been among the most contentious is the expansion of paid sick leave. Panel, we have 3 days left. We have the Senate Minority Leader here, the Senate GOP Leader with us. What needs to get done, Steve? What are you looking to do? Or
Well,
stop?
I think stop is probably the best narrative or my mindset on this one. I mean, look, I think you have what passed in the House recently, 5004, which I think is a quite onerous piece of legislation there. It gives expansive powers to the Commissioner of DEEP to put in legislation or regulation, a lot of things that I think would be onerous on businesses and costly. And then you have the paid sick leave, which I think, again, is a noble cause. I understand why many are pushing it, but would be critically difficult for small businesses to operate under. I mean, it's a costly thing. And so those are the two things that I'm looking at that we're going to be facing in the Senate in the next few days here, which I think we need to stop for the betterment of the people of the state, frankly.
Right through you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, no, look, now Senator Harding, we spent his time in the House. We always had a pretty good working relationship. I've seen in the early days of session that's extending up to the Senate. Really working with each other and being able to move the bills along is the most crucial part. And everybody has to give up a little bit, but you can't give up on your principles on a bill. Those two bills are going to be big fights. And with, 4 days left, 3 days left now, it's going to be difficult. So there's going to have to be some consensus building. But I think you're right. I think the legislature has to regain some of its power from deep in some of the agencies. It feels like they've been giving it a lot away lately.
Okay, so last Wednesday evening, the House passed a vote that would declare a climate emergency in Connecticut, encourages businesses and residents to adopt green energy solutions in an effort to reduce greenhouse emission gases. Here's what Democratic leaders had to say about that. Watch this.
Acknowledging that we are in a climate crisis, which is going to be one of the controversial parts of this bill, is foundational to what we're doing, because at this point, to deny that that's true is just preposterous.
This is really sort of a foundational document that's going to lead to a lot of activity by our agencies, but will also be part and parcel of the effort we're making to chart the state's energy future. We have our challenges, but we're really trying to fire on all cylinders, make sure we're doing everything we can across the board, particularly as it applies to renewable energy.
I'm concerned with the cost. I haven't seen a fiscal note yet, and there's a lot of incentives for people to switch to green. Who's going to pay for them? I relate it to it's similar to, like you said, to the EV. You're going to give a lot of subsidies for people for expensive heat pumps, and then the ratepayers are going to pay for those incentives.
All right, Harding, you get another bite at the apple on this one. Liz is deferring everything to you, but she lets McKinney run his mouth. Now you're the guy.
She knows I'm a house person at heart, so I'll give it back. She knows I'll give back at times. So, yeah, again, I think I just hit on it at the periphery of it. But I mean, this could be very costly to the people of the state. And again, I think as the speaker mentioned, you know, we're giving so much authority to the commissioners and to DEEP, and it's about time we start bringing it back in. And I think that's really the main message that the Republicans are saying and stating in terms of this particular bill. It's not so much a disagreement on the policy or the belief that we have to address greenhouse gas emissions in the state. It's about giving the power of the legislature to DEEP, and that too much of that has been going on.
Take a bite of this.
No, so from a climate change perspective, I think Connecticut is significantly losing ground, and we are leaving it up to some of the local leaders, such as my particular town, to really dive into some of these federal guidelines to make sure that we do better from a greenhouse gas climate change perspective. It looks like the state is moving more towards energy and energy efficiency and really leaving the environmental piece behind. So I'm a little disappointed on both sides of the aisle at this point from the LOB perspective, but less progressive, less. The proposal last year was a little more progressive. Now we're seeing more incentives than mandates. So we really have to figure out how we're going to dive in and really protect the earth moving forward.
Liz, what else are you looking at this session?
Well, for the rest of the session,
wrap up.
I think what we're really going to be talking about is ARPA, right? And we have this $400 million spending spree that the Democrats want to go on. Yep. Obviously, the consensus revenue is giving everyone this idea that we can just go spend the monopoly money. You know, the governor has been very strong about the fact that he only wants to give higher ed $100 million. My understanding is the Democrats want to double that number. And if I'm a Democrat looking at this situation, I'm going to go back to my district and tell constituents that we're spending $400 million, none of which impacts their affordability, none of which actually lowers tuition or does anything to help make their lives better. I think that's a very difficult argument for them to make when they go out and campaign.
Well, if you listen to the higher education facilities, they're saying if you don't give us the money, we're going to raise tuition. So I don't know, it's totally fair to say.
But they're doing that anyway,
with
all due respect. I mean, they've already raised tuition, and this money is not going to impact tuition.
It won't allow them to raise tuition, but it's my understanding, and Senator Harding may know better, that whatever money passes over to the university system is going to come with strings. There's going to be oversight. There's going to be fiscal accountability. I know that's an area that Representative Walker really feels strongly about.
Well, I mean, you know, Mr. Speaker, you know how this building operates, and particularly how the budgets operate. And a lot of you were part of that bipartisan budget that put in the fiscal guardrails. And what I fear, and I think Liz had mentioned it, is by doing what we're doing here, we're setting ourselves up to break those fiscal guardrails in the next biennium. You worked so hard to make that possible. It was a bipartisan budget. It was a bipartisan concept. It got extended when we reopened it in the legislature and extended those fiscal guardrails. We're simply setting ourselves up, in my opinion, to fail in terms of abiding by those guardrails.
They're kind of nibbling at the edges of the housing issue, but they've coming up recently with some innovative solutions.
Yeah, from a local perspective, what I'm looking at is the recent bill, I believe it's Senate Bill 416, that had a 6-hour floor debate on whether towns can allow for developers to convert retail spaces and commercial spaces into apartments to attack some of the housing issues and the lack of housing that we have. So I'm interested to see how that particular bill progresses. What are some of the things that we're going to look for? We know many municipalities, such as mine, have a reval, mandated next year, and so we're looking to. The market has driven up the residential property, right? So tax burden is going to be significantly shifting to the residential away from commercial. So this bill can really help spread the burden out a little more in the future to really combat some things. So I'm really excited to see how that progresses. I'm leaning into that particular bill, but we have to see how things.
Yeah, and the House passed 2 bills Friday, and it will be on the Senate calendar tomorrow, Monday. So.
Great.
Right, Steve, they're doing enough for housing?
Well, I mean, I have my disagreements with that particular bill, but I think the mayor mentioned in terms of incentives as it relates to the 5004. I mean, I think it should be more based on incentives when it comes down to housing and to land use issues. I think what we saw there was, again, a kind of a state mandate upon municipalities, and that was my objection and many of my colleagues' objections.
All right, guys. Hey, so amidst the end of the legislative session, state budget officials released some higher than expected revenue figures last week. The report projects an operating surplus of more than $250 million for the current fiscal year. Governor Lamont touted the figures in a written statement, and here's what House Speaker, our pal Matt Ritter, had to say about that. Watch this.
Right now, we're on good times. We will make a very, very robust contribution to the pension fund. Yes, it is volatility money, right? And so we'll have to continue to talk about that as we go forward, probably. But if I hear the word deficit, or I hear the word, budget, open the budget, folks, the state is in a very solid financial position, and the estimates that will come out today will demonstrate that.
And Republicans acknowledge the revenue projections are trending in a decent direction, but they added one caveat. Watch this.
The good news is that there will be more money to put toward our unfunded obligations, which, the Democrats want to ignore how we got here and what necessitated these caps. We still have $80 billion of unfunded deficits that volatility money is going to pay down. At the same time, it's controlling the spending in the state of Connecticut.
Well, Harding, this is where you get the opportunity in the Senate as the Republicans to play like spoiler and stop these guys from taking all the money, right?
Well, I believe in that. And again, it's based upon the volatility cap that was put in place in a bipartisan fashion. And we have to abide by that. And I'm happy it's going towards paying down debt. I'm happy that money is going back into the reserves as well. These are all positive things. But I think one thing that we need to look at and really highlight is the fact that this is going to do nothing in terms of balancing things in fiscal year 25 and abiding by the revenue cap in fiscal year 25. So we shouldn't take these numbers to think that somehow we shouldn't make the adjustments necessary to abide by the revenue cap. And that doesn't seem to be what the Speaker wants to do here, and open up the budget and what the House Republicans have done in proposing a proposal that actually brings us in within the confines of the revenue cap in fiscal year 25. And I think folks are looking at this and saying, well, we don't have to open up the budget. No, the two things are mutually exclusive. It's positive. It's trending in the right direction. We still should be opening up the budget and balancing the budget percent.
Hey, Joe.
Look, Senator Harding brings up a lot of good points, but we also have a lot of nonprofits out there. We have municipalities. We have others that are really crying for funding. And the nonprofits haven't seen increases. I think the last time was 2015 or 2016. They got a little bit last year, but not nearly what they need. They've taken over a lot of crucial services of the state. So I will argue for that and how to find the balance. That's why they're the leaders now.
All right, guys, up next on Cap Report, Cap Report goes blue. We're going to learn a little bit about something called Act Blue. Our man at the state capitol, Newsday's political contributor, our pal Mike Cerulli, is here to tell us all about it when we get back. Do not go away.
Look at smiling Mike, ready to go.
We rely as Democrats on small donors. We rely on people who are just chipping in $5 or $10. We don't rely on people who give hundreds of thousands of dollars. That this will bring us in line with all the other states across the country.
Well, all our Democratic pals certainly know what Senator Bob Duff is talking about, something called Act Blue, and he's pushing a bill that would have an effect of allowing the Democratic fundraising platform to operate here in Connecticut. Joining us to break down one of Duff's more interesting priorities this session is Newsday's political contributor, our pal Mike Cerulli. So, Mike, what piqued your interest about all this?
Yeah, good morning to you, Tom. The Act Blue bill passed in the Senate last week along party lines. Currently, candidates for state office who are participating in Connecticut's clean election programs aren't allowed to use Act Blue or its Republican counterpart, Win Red. That's because those partisan platforms encourage donors to essentially leave a tip to help fund their operations. State elections officials argue that that tipping scheme amounts to an in-kind donation, and therefore the platforms themselves are impermissible. Republicans seem to agree with the argument of the State Elections Enforcement Commission that Duff's law could alter the state's campaign finance system in a way that's negative. Duff's law would reverse Seek's rules and open the door for the platform to be used in Connecticut, just like it's used around the country. And that could be a major development for many Democrats.
Why is that, Mike? Aren't there already companies online that provide fundraising here in Connecticut?
Yeah, there are, but none nearly as well-known or popular as Act Blue. Any active Democratic supporter will know Act Blue, and importantly, Act Blue knows them. It has their credit card information saved. It's well integrated with Democratic campaign softwares. And I would say the fact that Senate Democrats have dedicated time to pushing this bill in the short session is indicative of Act Blue's value. They wouldn't waste time, fleeting time, bringing this bill to the floor if it wasn't a singularly effective platform. Democrats have used it to raise more than $1 billion in every single election cycle since 2018. It's a huge part of the reason we've seen the price tag for federal races skyrocket. Remember, in the days of Linda McMahon's Senate campaigns, $50 million. That was an eye-popping number. A decade later, 2022, the most expensive Senate race topped out at more than $250 million in combined fundraising, much of that driven by small-dollar Democratic donors. So it's really a sea change in how campaigns are financed, but Connecticut has largely been left out of that. Yes, federal Democrats, Chris Murphy, Jim Himes, they use ActBlue to help them raise millions, but ActBlue could really open the door for less established state-level candidates to more easily finance potentially insurgent campaigns, Tom.
Bringing the knowledge, Mike Cerulli. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Appreciate it. See you next week.
Be here.
Up next on Calp Report, we're going to have a little chat about car theft in juvenile justice. Stick around, we go away. Cerulli, bringing the knowledge, huh? Bringing the 411. One issue that continues to get a bit of chatter at the state capitol has to do with the ongoing issue of juvenile crime, specifically car thefts in Connecticut, more specifically the thefts of Kias and Hyundais. Recent YouTube documentary highlighted the CT Kia boys, showing how easy it is to steal cars just to go joyriding. The Montville police posting this photo last week of an ignition ripped out of a vehicle in town. Police giving away ignition locks to try to deter would-be thieves. There's a problem all over the country, but the documentary really highlighted how this gang of young thieves really doesn't seem to be concerned about any of the consequences. Last Thursday, Minority Leader Vinnie Candelora was asked about why a juvenile justice bill hasn't moved forward. Another Republican also weighed on the issue. Watch this.
The biggest concern in the near future is essentially the continuation of not holding children accountable. I mean, right now they want to try to create a system where children cannot be arrested at all for any crime under the age of 12. So we're just concerned that there is, the state of Connecticut is moving toward a Lord of the Flies approach in its criminal justice system where there are no rules.
I would like to see some sort of mandatory sentencing for individuals that steal any type of motor vehicle, so that way they will think twice before doing it.
Democrat we spoke with sees another big problem, and that would be the power of social media. Watch this.
I think that folks are chasing clout. I'm younger, and I know younger folks pay attention to the social media and how to build up their followers and their views, and this has done that. This has created folks to become more influential on social media because of the things that they're doing. And so views and likes are really getting folks to do bad things that they shouldn't be doing because they know that it works.
All right, Hardy, this is red meat for you, although I'm not sure there's a lot of Kias in West Cornwall and Salisbury.
No, there are not. There are not.
Okay.
But nevertheless, I had my two vehicles stolen from my driveway a couple of years back, and I should have locked the vehicles, obviously. But with that said, I think really what we're seeing here is a movement over the past few years too lenient on our criminal justice system here in the state of Connecticut, and taking too many authorities and steps away from police officers that are trying to protect. And I understand there was noble causes in terms of why that was being done, particularly with juveniles, but what we're seeing here is there's zero consequences. There's zero deterrences for young individuals to stop them from committing these crimes. And so they're just doing it without any consequences, and you're seeing now the repercussions of it. There are reasonable steps that could be taken in place that Representative Paletta mentioned, so did Representative Candelora. They should be taken because, frankly, we're seeing too much of this go on. It's getting worse and worse. It's not going to get better anytime soon.
Daniel, you must see it in Bloomfield. Your police must tell you about it.
Well, actually, since the Department of Emergency Services released their report in 2022, we have seen a decline of these car thefts, of murders, of these violent crimes, where we saw an uptick due to COVID. And so these declines are coming down. The stats are getting better. It's so frustrating. We do have to do things about it. But I think that putting more emphasis on the response and the consequences, we have to look into that. I think we should be on the preventative side. We have CCM partnering with the Dalio Foundation on 119,000 people, youth in Connecticut, are disconnected. due to transportation, housing, issues of that nature. And so we need to really dive into that. I'm a commissioner on that, and we have been looking into seeing in public hearings around the state to acquire more information on what local communities can do to combat and continue to put emphasis on the decline in their own communities. It is frustrating. We have to look at this, but we have to do it together on the same side.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we can talk about statistics all we want, but the reality is people don't feel safer. And so you have to address these issues. And when we talk about budgets and priorities, again, I'm going to go back to the House Republican budget that actually invests in K through 12 education, that funds special education, that goes into our municipal schools and bolsters these programs and bolsters these activities instead of spending $400 million, 200 of which goes to higher ed. So if we're going to say these are issues we need to focus on, then we need to put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah, I mean, I like what Danielle said because it is completely accurate. These disconnected youths, and it doesn't start when they're 12, 13, 14. It starts younger. We need to be putting more money into the early steps. I know there's one program out there that works with the schools where they have problem kids that are struggling in the learning environment. They come in and they tutor them and they work with them and go side by side. Those are the programs that are going to ultimately make the difference. I agree there should be consequences, but when you're responding to the actions at 16, 17, it's already in some cases too late. We have to be better earlier.
All right, guys, next up on Calp Report, cities as song topics. Connecticut's biggest city gets their own tune. Stick around. We won't miss this one.
Is Bridgeport still the biggest city or state?
Well, over the years, there's been some great songs written about cities. New York State of Mind, Viva Las Vegas, London Calling, even Detroit Rock City. So you may ask yourself, hey, when's someone going to write a song about Bridgeport? Well, my Calp Report friends, your ship has come in. Watch this.
You look good in my bluefish cap and your little sundress tan. Come on back to Bridgeport.
Yeah, that's Mayor Ganem's buddy Scott Smith performing his song Bridgeport at City Hall. Ganem, well, he seemed to dig it. He wasn't tapping his foot that much because, hey, must have been hard to rhyme ballot fraud and indictments.
Well, I was saying, during the break, Liz is proposing her own lyrics, and they all had absentee ballots in them.
That is too funny.
All right,
I have nothing. That is all you need to say.
Okay, for the mayor, for the coach, Lizzie, and the minority leader, the GOP leader, Harding.
Come on, do something with Kitty Can't
Throw it in.
Let's go, Harding. Oh!